Hello, our friends, Evolutionary, EEARTS, and Heart's Home family.
Hello there. Welcome back.
Yes, guys, as always, check in. Make sure you're subscribed with a little bell click to all three channels each day. We want to thank everybody for your support over at Ko-Fi, where you can do a one-time donation or monthly support, just like you can do over on Patreon. Couldn't do it without your support over there. So we were just getting done with meditation and mantras this morning. And there was there was a bunch of different things that came up. Both of us got like different things to share, but they're actually interrelated. And so we're going to see how they come out and kind of flow with it. I wanted to just start by, again, reiterating that we are so much more than what we think. If we just think we are a bunch of different chemical reactions causing our consciousness to spontaneously arise because of this physical body, boy, we are wrong. Completely wrong. Couldn't be any farther from the truth. In reality, we're just a localized point of consciousness in this massive field, this massive ocean of consciousness, which extends everywhere in all different densities. And here in this apparently 3D realm, we have a very, very what we could call dense experience. Dense, heavy, intense. There's a lot of words we could use to describe this experience that we have here.
It is a very dense form of plasma. If we look at the sun, we understand the sun is also made of plasma, and our bodies are made of that. So whenever the sun sneezes, we are going to get some type of information. It's like that plasma is reaching out to touch one another because there's a magnetism involved with that also. So for us to be open and receptive, that can call in many different energies. And if you're deliberately going out into the sun or even just looking at the sun out the window, that creates a magnetism, allowing that information to come and give you even more information.
There's a old song from the 60s that says we are stardust, and we have to get ourselves back to the garden. And in so many ways, boy, that is so true. We're not only stardust, we're actually stars in a way. And getting back to the garden, if you want to look at that as the original program, yeah, you couldn't be any more correct. When you look to us, what are we really? Again, we're a point of localized consciousness, and we're having a particular density experience. And when we look at the layers of the energy field that lies around us, again, the physical body is just the center. When the physical body is no longer functioning and the spirit lets go of it, cuts the silver cord. For those of you that don't know, there's, or maybe you have heard of the silver cord, there is a cord that does kind of connect the physical body to the etheric, and then there's these different layers to our consciousness field. All we simply do is the consciousness releases the physical body will deteriorate, go back into the earth, and our point of focus shifts. And, what happens, to put it really simply, if we look into terms of 3D and 4D, we shift from a 3D perspective when we are awake to a 4D perspective when we're sleeping. Well, then we're all 4D when we're out of the body. Typically, when we talk about ascension, we're talking about heading up to 5D and then even higher. But the reality is there are aspects of ourselves which are already up there, so to speak. There's much more to our consciousness as we look at these layers. Each one of these layers is in some ways representing another density. And again, where do they end? We don't really know. There are some very, very gifted psychics, intuitives that can see 13, 14, 15 layers. It might go on forever because ultimately we are all drops in the ocean. How do you distinguish one drop in the ocean from another?
That's right. That's a concept in and of itself, but it is really interesting to entertain. It's like thinking of us, where does one part end and another part begin? But if water is close enough to each other, you can see how they kind of, going back to the magnetism, how they kind of pull together and it likes to touch. But then if you move it just right, it'll break apart again. So really, where's the beginning? Where's the end? I think that's for us to decide in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And, right now, Cindy and I's knees are probably 3 inches apart. Our heads are about 2 feet apart. And yet, there are aspects of our energy body that are completely tied together at this point because we're so close to each other. So in one way, we have merged into a particular field of energy. And, if you're around somebody that you're incongruous with, it's going to manifest. Again, we are attracted to people and situations and areas of a certain frequency and vibration. It has to do with our own frequency and vibration. And again, we are a localized point of consciousness in this field of consciousness. And there's a reason why we might be drawn to a place at a certain point in time, because we're resonating at a certain frequency. We grow, we change, events occur. All of a sudden, it doesn't feel like it did. There's that old saying, you can never go back home, right? And honestly, me being a gypsy, which I have been, when I went back up to my hometowns, in Connecticut, the one I grew up in, and then the one I spent most of my young adulthood in, they didn't feel like home anymore, and in fact, they didn't feel like home when I was there anymore. So, again, we do change, we do grow. Our whole frequency field is always changing depending on each day. See, this is the thing. Nothing is static. Nothing is static. Everything is in a constant state of flux and change. Flux and change. Now that should give us a lot of hope, because we can just, when we get enough people to realize this, then all the paradigms are shattered. And, some might say, what's the harm in letting people have a certain paradigm when we know that the paradigm is limiting us? And that's because, again, there is an effect on the other fields of consciousness out there that each one of us has. So, again, that's the interconnectedness of all these things. And that's also why it's so important to constantly be trying to pick each other up and trying to help others to understand the interconnectedness of all things. The Devas, when we started channeling the Devas, they told us that where they are, again, 6th density, 7th density, very, very high density, where we are, here right now, affects them. Our consciousness, the more the collective here in this lower density can rise, the higher they can go in the higher density. And that was something they shared early on with us. When you look out at the night sky and you're away from all the light pollution, it could be overwhelming. Honestly, if you've never experienced that, if you've grown up in New York, LA, Chicago, and you've never really gotten outside to really, be somewhere like in the desert, high desert's amazing when you're around no light pollution. It will boggle your mind when you see how many stars there are. I mean, it's just mind expanding to see this. And then you get yourself a pair of binoculars. We have some binoculars that weigh like 5 pounds. They're so big. And you just look at one tiny little patch, and that gets expanded out, or a telescope. And it's just, you can't believe all these points of light that's out there. And then if you think about the fact that there are planets surrounding these points of light, and there's all these little other individual units of consciousness that are out there having this experience, it's just staggering. And when we recognize that the points of light themselves are consciousness, they're a bigger consciousness in some ways. They're again, a higher frequency of consciousness, greater intensity of consciousness, and they are supporting life. Life is all about supporting other forms of life. If we don't, recognize this simple fact, we will never really grasp how we progress.
Mm-hmm. And also, when you look at the night sky, keep in mind that this is information for you. We definitely absorb the sun when we're out in the daytime, but did you know we can absorb the light of the stars too? And just for a fun experiment, I would invite you to bring a notebook outside and see what you feel under the sun, and then get that same notebook and go outside at night and see what you feel under the stars, and even talk to them. Because if you do start talking to them, you'll notice they start to twinkle, and you might think, oh, it's just coincidence, but it's very consistent. If you do go outside and you start to mentally communicate to them, you will receive information in various forms, or however you're best able to receive it, and just take notes of those little changes. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. We here on the 3D, this is another thing that the guide said again recently. They wanted us to recognize that even though we're having a tough time as a collective, and as individuals too, most people are being faced with serious challenges in this time. Being in and having a body is still a blessing, and that might sound crazy to some of you at this point in time, but it is a reality, because this is temporary. This is not the way we are most of the time. In fact, this is just a very, very little small breath in the life of the soul, so to speak, being embodied in this. But yet this gives us an opportunity for growth and expansion that we can carry with us forward as we go through our soul's evolution.
Mm-hmm. I mean, every single one of us, we all have guides. We have a dominant guide, we have ancestors, we have other beings that choose to experience or help us experience this, and somehow, some way, this is all written in your life contract. Like when I look at Mike, I mean, his guides are overwhelming. He's always having more. When I met him, there was at least 30, and now he's pushing 100 guides. And oh my gosh, what do you do with that many guides? Well, you do a lot. And I can see him throughout the day. I can see his energy shift and change depending on who steps in to assist. I mean, we are always us, and guides are just that, guidance. I think the biggest problem with people and their guides right now is people don't call them in because they don't believe in them. They actually sideline their angels and guides because they don't believe. But the more things you experience and the more you ask for assistance and guidance, the more these beings are going to step in and help you. Now, when I do look at someone and their guides and angels, I have to be very careful that I'm not opening up to Mike's guides and angels, all of my guides and angels, and all of the guides and angels to the person that we're working on. Because as you can imagine, all of that information flooding in, pouring in, can get very overwhelming. So it's important to have a strong spiritual practice where you can sift this energy and you're able to block portions of it coming in. Otherwise, you just have too much information, a river, and there's absolutely no way your human mind can process it. And these are things that we learn throughout life. We start to understand how expansive we can be or how limited we can be. And again, there's never a wrong answer. You just have to be there for you and understand that there's so many other beings out there to help you if you open your heart and mind to them.
Absolutely. So those that are embodied in this world, if we believe the numbers they give us, and say there was 8 billion people having a human experience at this point in time on the planet, If you look at the guides that are watching the people have the experience, they're vastly outnumbered, vastly. The reality is, again, every single star you see up there is a consciousness. And yes, there are many collectives, many groupings. What Cindy was picking up as we look at a swirl of a galaxy is that galaxies are soul streams, so to speak. And we know, when we look at these photographs, we're talking massive unconscionable numbers of different, unique, individual perspectives. These are all beings. Every single light you see is a being. And yet, when we zoom in on one tiny little spot, you could zoom in on one tiny single little star, and you see all these collectives of stars that choose to have an experience together. At some point, there are galaxies that will collide and create something new. And, again, this is new collectives coming together. It's just never ending. This is the point. Consciousness is never ending. It's always just changing and evolving and having new experiences.
And what's so beautiful about collectives is you are getting all of the information, all the years of wisdom and experience that just one of those beings has to offer. And then as they come together, you're getting so many different aspects of being, so many different layers of understanding and guided wisdom. And that's what makes the collectives different than the individual. But then you look at all of it, and all of these stars are made of light. So they are all coming from the same source, yet very, very, very unique and individual in how they operate.
Absolutely. It can be overwhelming and mind-blowing. But again, when we have this human experience, the human experience is a temporary experience. And this is also why they don't want to interfere. When we talk about the beings that do love us and care about us, and when we leave these bodies, yes, typically what happens is we're greeted by loved ones, all sorts of loved ones, and even loved ones that you might not know during this life, but you knew before you jumped in. Again, things are so much different than what we are given in the mainstream religions and systems, but that's because, again, we are in a reality that is all about having a certain perspective, a control matrix in place to keep us from understanding exactly who and what we are. So there are aspects of us right now that are up on the higher densities. In fact, I was giving the analogy to Cindy when we were talking about, well, it's probably a good analogy for a completely separate video. But again, if you are to, say, pour metal and you're going to try to create a sword, or you're going to make a tool, a hammer, again, you pour it into a die. You can't pour molten metal into a wooden die. It's just going to dissolve. And you can't get all of us, the entirety of who we really are, into a 3D body. It will not be able to handle it. So there's only a limited part of us that actually comes and has this incarnation. And thus, this is what we are referring to when we talk about the higher self in many ways. Every single galaxy out there is a collective that's resonating at a certain frequency, desiring to have a certain type of experience together, each one unique. When we look at spirit orbs, again, as above, so below, when you look at the countless numbers of stars out there, you see the countless numbers of spirit orbs. And no, they're not all just dust particles. And typically, again, you will find a lot of these often around areas where people used to congregate. There's definitely a lot of orbs you'll find at the cemetery, because you'll have a lot of people still being wanting to be near the body. In some cases, not really understanding completely what's happened yet, hanging around the body, or hanging around the house, or hanging around, even walking downtown. I mean, we will find this, that there might be great crowds of people out there, and in these days, who knows what they're, talking about. You'll find their spirits all around them. And so many of them are their guides. They're their family members that have passed on, their friends, they're people that they didn't know in this life, but that are there supporting them when they come into this life. Again, the as above, so below, as within, so without. It's just, it can be very, very reassuring if you look at it from that point of view. No, you don't just go to darkness, and you don't just wait in a nothingness until you're pulled back out of the grave to be given a new body. No, your consciousness is always there. You always go on. And a lot of times you could see faces in the spirit orbs. Yeah, they're still remembering who they think they are, and often it's just the last incarnation. And yet, there are also imprints that can be placed on certain areas, certain places, or hang around certain people too, of intense frequencies and which again, emotions are frequencies. It can be overwhelming to contemplate, but the reality should be very, very, very reassuring. Again, the temporary experience is the human experience. We are consciousness. We cannot be created or destroyed. We always were. We are just simply on a journey.
And you always are. You never go away. You are created, and you have your individual soul nature about you. And that's how everything is. And everything else on this planet has consciousness that is just like yours. The trees, the fruit, the pets. It's a little bit of a difficult concept to pull in, but even an apple that's sitting there on a tree has the same consciousness that you do. It might just sit there and overlook the yard, but it's very, very content. And it also wishes to be part of you, because this is why fruit shows itself. It bears itself. It wants to be, this might sound a little strange, but it does want to be prayed over. It wants its vibration raised up before you bring it to take it to be a part of you. Everything has its own purpose and its own consciousness. Even insects have their own little way about them. They are their own being. So we are always here. Our pets have the same consciousness. They have emotions. They feel, they hurt, they love. Mostly they love. So if we're able to take that in as a perspective that everything has its own way about them, it would change so many things if we were all simply able to experience this and feel it and know it, not just by someone telling you, but actually experience being that fruit on the tree and looking out over a lawn or over an orchard and just sitting there being completely content until the time comes when it chooses to have another experience. So I wish we really taught this from such a young age, but there are, in Hindu areas, they teach this at a very young age. In Sanatana Dharma, I think they teach these things too.
So when we see these depictions of angels watching from above in the clouds, you could also just conceptualize as spirit orbs. You could conceptualize as little suns and little stars. Again, we're just points of consciousness. Why do we view them as being humans with wings? Well, because we can fly, because we can astral project. And in fact, when we're out of the body, we just think of where we want to go and we go there. And you could practice that now as far as a meditative practice and gain control when you do go and explore the astral and do that through lucid dreaming. Again, we do have so many beings watching us all the time. When you look at the light that a star gives off, it's so huge compared to a spirit orb, but this is just simply, these are beings that are a little bit farther along. We all come from source, we all come back to source, and we have journeys, and we are all part of the one consciousness that is everywhere, everywhere, every density. And when we recognize we're never alone, these beings up that shine more and more light, it's because they realize the oneness, and the oneness is love. And that's the overlying principle. So again, it makes it very, very clear and very, very obvious which belief systems are given to us by the controllers and which ones really do come from above. And so they are always looking, watching, and they outnumber those in the bodies. So, again, they want to help. It's just natural. It's obvious, and yeah, you could visualize them in a very human way, having debates and saying, why do you think they're doing that? Why can't they see, and why won't they even just ask us for help? Because if they ask us, we could at least help them in this way and in that way. And so many people are terrified to ask in any way but what they've been given, except through the official books of this particular world system. So, they don't ask for help from their guides or their angels or any of those of the Devic realm. And the Devic realm is all about supporting life in every way, shape, and form. So, ask for help and you will get it. And we're going to do we'll do a short video also that just gives you like we'll come up with a good little way of asking your guides for their help. But I mean, it could be as simple as I acknowledge those that are here to help me in my human experience. And I give thanks for your blessings and your guidance. I open my heart and mind to my spirit guides, those of the angelic realm that truly have my best interests in mind. Please help guide and provide.
Yes, and details are important when you're asking for help. That's something that I learned along my journey, is that details really matter. So, I mean, it's nice to, like what Mike said, is absolutely perfect. And the only thing I might add in would be to simply say, and harm to none, because that's part of who you are.
Absolutely. And then as you work with them, you could get more specific. And again, we might be desiring something, like maybe you want, the perfect little homestead. And, again, things might not be going to manifest in the way that you expect it, but it might also be because it might be actually better for the soul's growth. And this is where we have to develop that trust, but we keep putting the energy out there. And as Cindy said, that is something that's a given in many traditions, and harm to none. Absolutely. So I hope this helps in any way, shape, or form. Do share your comments. We look forward to them. Much love. God bless, and namaste.
Namaste.